Good afternoon and happy Sunday, everyone. Man, I'm tired. I woke up tired, and I still got to drive to Concord to drop my kid off with her cousins because they're all going to summer camp together. And so I've been trying to spend a lot of time with her before she goes because I'll miss her. And today we went to the antique fair. We kind of went looking for the same things, and neither one of us found what we were looking for, but we both got something that, a souvenir, if you will. She got this clown hobo for 20 bucks, and we Googled it on eBay, and almost every instance of it is worth 70 bucks now. I got the tail light to a 59 Impala. I don't even have a 59 Impala, but the tail light was 20 bucks. It's a little ding, but it could be straightened out. And, worst case scenario, I make my money back. Best case scenario, I double my money. Actually, worst case is I don't make my money back. I give it to someone, generate goodwill, and that's not a bad deal either. But while I was there, I learned something about Mexico and kind of current cultura. This isn't an ancient artifact story. This is more modern. In the 80s, I remember, my grandfather and the other traqueros, people who worked for the railroad, came over here as braceros. Even French dads who were old, just older Mexican gente. When I was, we'll say I'm 15 and they were already grandfathers. So these were, not the dads, but the grandfathers in the 80s. And I remember that almost to the person, all of them always carried a pocket knife. And, they would use it to, when they ate lunch, cut an apple into slices and eat the apple. They needed to use it for something, like they always had this little pocket knife. They would pull it out, open it real slow, cut what they needed to cut, wipe it off real slow and carefully, and then put it away. Almost every old Mexican vato I knew, paisa style, had a little pocket knife. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tool. And I remember, I would hear them talk, and they would always say, they wanted a little pocket knife del arbolito, which means the little tree. I want the little tree pocket knife. I want the little tree pocket knife. Look, I got a little tree pocket knife. These are the good ones. This is the one you want. My grandfather would tell me that. Look, he would show it to me and say, this is the kind you want when you carry your own pocket knife. Well, today's days, I don't think a lot of people carry little pocket knives. More people probably carry straps than pocket knives. And again, they weren't weapons because they were small. They were like this big, and it was just a tool to cut vegetables, fruit, whatever you needed it for, right? And so as I'm walking around, I see people selling knives, and I see this one guy, and I go over there, and I'm looking, and he says, "Are you looking for anything in particular?" And I tell him, when I was a little kid, my grandfather, he always had a pocket knife, and he showed me one and said, when you get one del arbolito. And there was a guy there, a white dude, that was studying the knives, knew the guy. He was obviously into knives. And he looks to the guy that's selling knives. And he goes, "It's a Boker." And then the guy that's selling them says, he was a Mexican vato. Like an Americanized, like maybe he'd served, he's second, third generation, but he still spoke Spanish. And he says, "Look, man, in the 50s or 60s, Boker sent a huge shipment of these knives to Mexico. And they don't rust. The old paisas would actually sharpen their knives by rubbing the two knives together." And then the guy that was there, the brother, walked up at the time. He goes, "Man, iron sharpens iron." I've heard that, right? And they would say that these knives would do that, and that the little casing was bone, so they wouldn't rust, and they had really good seals, is what he said. But he said that when Boker sent this big shipment to Mexico, the people really loved them, especially along the coast, because they wouldn't rust. And so it kind of became the knife to have in Mexico. And then when people came here, they kind of wanted the knives that they had over there, which were these Bokers. Boker. And so I asked him, I go, do you got any? And he says, you know what, man, if I get those, I sell them all in the same day. And I go, they're that popular. And he goes, you know, it's always young Mexican vatos that want them because they want the knives that their dads or grandfathers had. Like, that tripped me out that he said that. And then he says, you know, the Mexicans call him el del arbolito. And that's when I knew he was real, because that's what my grandfather used to say. And I hadn't told him that part yet. I just told him my grandfather had one and it had a little tree on it. And right away they knew. Him and the guy that I guess knows him and comes to see him every antique fair. And so that's just some history I wanted to share. In the 80s, almost all the older tios and grandpas carried a little pocket knife. The little pocket knife with the tree is the convertible 59 Impala of pocket knives for the raza. The way Chicanos want a convertible 59, the old paisas wanted a Boker del Arbolito knife. And so when I got back, I Googled them and looked them up. And the company's still in existence, but those little pocket knives are like $400. And, you know, we would have never bought a knife that expensive way back then. So I'm thinking it was like people that still had them from Mexico or what have you. And so, yeah, that's the story. In the 80s, the old Mexicanos, and these were all, the ones that I was around were kind of traqueros. They worked for the railroad. They came over as braceros. And so, you know, they were railroad workers. Sometimes they would be sent to Truckee or like Utah to fix the, they would walk the tracks and make repairs. You know, these were not the engineers. These were, you know, people who were braceros, labor. But it was a good job, you know, back then. And the way my grandfather got it was you just shaped up. You showed up one day, the railroad said, come on, we need this many people. And then you were employed by the railroad, which is, you know, you're kind of employed by the feds. They get their retirement from the U.S. Treasury. Their spouses get retirement. I don't think those jobs are really around like they were. And they were good jobs for a lot of raza, for a lot of black folks. If your family worked for the railroad, you were doing all right. You know, my dad, he was an alcoholic, but my grandfather worked for the railroad, and he didn't do that great here. He liked to party, kick it, but towards the end of his time, he lived with us. Me and him were pretty close while he had his house built in Mexico prior to retirement. And from him, I learned that when I get a little pocket knife, I need to get one del Arbolito. So I'll add that to my list of things to look for when I go to these antique fairs or flea markets. I'll have my eye out for a Boker knife. Anyways, just some 80s raza history from my perspective. And apparently the knife guy knew that it was a thing with young raza to want those, because Boker sent a whole bunch to Mexico that were highly valued by the people there for their high quality. And some of that appreciation for the value came over during the mass migration of the 80s. And now there's young kids, you know, maybe hipsters, what have you, I don't know, who want to recapture some of that nostalgia of their grandfathers and older relatives' little pocket knives. So they're a hot item. Dude said he can't keep them, and that it's always young Mexican vatos buying them because of that history. And he didn't have any to sell me. They were all gone. So it's not like he was trying to tell me a story to sell me one. Anyways, have a good one. I wish I wasn't so tired for this drive, but I'm glad my kids get to experience things like that. I didn't go to those things, didn't have fun like that. And who knows, maybe if I find a good deal on a Boker, I'll get her one too, so that when she's out camping, she can cut her little apples and stuff. Anyways, have a good one. Much love. Hopefully I'll post again pretty soon. Enjoy.